Before we get into it, and to first offer the Critical Role fans who are no doubt sharpening their pitchforks right about now an olive branch, know your precious web series is not alone in this phenomenon. Why Critical Role is being used in particular is because it's emblematic of all the quirky OCs, Marvel-esque millennial snark, and main character syndrome that's led to a sharp decline in writing quality and storytelling as a whole across role-playing games. We can now see the end result of this in the upcoming game that's parading the corpse of Dragon Age around and proudly wearing its skin like some fantasy-style Leatherface.
Now there's an interesting image.
Of course, this didn't appear out of nowhere. Tumblr culture, as much as that's considered passé, cringe, or whatever these days, was big during the late 2000s and early to mid 2010s. The term OC, an acronym for original character, grew out of fanfiction culture that was big on forums back in the day and continues to be on sites like Archive of Our Own or AO3. Tumblr specifically was a perfect place for reverence of these characters and sharing your own, because it was a major stepping point between the outdated, clunky forums of old and a more visually pleasing, dare I say, aesthetic social media account. This is generalizing, of course, and I have no interest in touching on the larger culture war discussion with a 10-foot pole. Short of living under a rock though, you're probably familiar with the typical Tumblr experience. Fan art of fictional men really going at it, people passionately writing essays about their favourite TV shows, or posting surprisingly detailed art about their sexual kinks, alternate universes, and so on. Kill me! You can imagine then that a community consisting of horny teenagers, artists, bleeding heart romantics, edgy goths, and weed enthusiasts was the perfect target demographic when, much like gaming let's play culture that was taking off around the same time, channels like Geek and Sundry and Critical Role began to share tabletop and actual plays. This proved so successful, in fact, that it launched the careers of e-celebrities like Felicia Day, Will Wheaton, Ashley Birch, and I'm sure many other names I'm not familiar with and can't be bothered looking up. Whether at the time Critical Role imagined itself to be the juggernaut it is today doesn't really matter, but the promise of a group of popular union voice actors living out their dream characters to a live audience became a phenomenon. It wasn't so much about the substance of these sessions, but whatever hijinks the group got up to that week. People who had never played a role-playing game before, computer or otherwise, tuned in to see their favourite member of the cast, their favourite character, and where the dice rolls would lead to next. What this in turn encouraged was the forming of parasocial relationships and a genuinely cult-like audience of users. Much like TV shows, video games, movies, books, TikToks, and so many other things, Critical Role represented a way for many people, whatever the reasoning, to live vicariously through the stories they were consuming. Characters became a part of who they are, and the point of hotly contested discussion, fan art, theories, and so on. It's only natural then that given this success, companies making role-playing games would push more towards the growing fan base and catering to what people wanted. To use indie games as a point of comparison, you may have heard the term streamer game or streamer bait. Essentially cheap, low-effort games that are made for easy reaction content on YouTube and specifically to be played by large Twitch streamers for little more than their 15 seconds of fame. This is, sadly, what RPGs turned into, games that are more about their characters and the importance of their players, making them feel special and powerful than meaning, nuance, and depth. But okay, maybe your first reaction is that I'm exaggerating or it's simply not the case. For a better example, we don't need to look any further than Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. Despite Josh Sawyer's apparent dislike of RPG romances, that apparently didn't stop Obsidian from making an entirely tangential sideshow featuring self-inserts and hiring the cast of Critical Role to voice it. Deadfire is truly remarkable in how it undermines its own universe by essentially being a crossover event with genuinely some of the worst romance dialogue ever written.
I'd sear your name over my heart, Watcher, if you'd only let me.
Given it was released around the peak of Critical Role, Pillars 2 doesn't feel like it exists on its own merit, but a cynical cash grab that uses e-celebrities to justify itself. Ironically, it didn't even end up selling that well. This isn't the same Obsidian that made KOTOR 2 and New Vegas. The Outer Worlds proved that beyond a doubt. But that's just one game, right? Well, now we get to Baldur's Gate 3. I already made an entire video about tearing that travesty a new one, how the main story makes no fucking sense, and how Larian desecrates two legendary games to desperately claim it's a true successor, spiritual or otherwise. The game is disappointing beyond words, disgraceful to the legacy of the Ballspawn and iconic characters, but Baldur's Gate 3 also fails in its central origin characters. Now would probably be a good time to clarify that I'm not saying Karlach, Astarion, Shadowheart, Will, and so on are poorly written. It's perfectly valid to love these characters to death. Hell, there are characters I feel that way about to this day, and I'm not trying to take away the acclaim that the characters and cast have received. It's well deserved. But if anything, that's kind of the problem. Baldur's Gate 3's central cast suffers from a terminal case of main character syndrome. These characters are so important that the fate of the game world revolves around them. They have the ears of gods, the attention of beings that are powerful enough to rewrite aspects of the setting, and none of that is ever earned. Even the very game starts within Avernus. You don't work your way up from nothing like Baldur's Gate or Fallout or Gothic or Morrowind or Wrath of the Righteous. You're already there because you're special and because it looks cool, I guess. These characters are so important, in fact, that it is hard to take the rest of the world seriously. Everything you do has major consequences. Everyone's just sitting around for you to come and fix their problems. It's like the worst parts of Skyrim, in that the world feels like a static stage that bends at the player's convenience. This takes the worst aspects of OP, that guy, or special snowflake mentality in tabletop roleplaying and makes a whole game out of it. And Baldur's Gate 3 is directly the result of Critical Role and the worship of player characters at the expense of believability and everything else. Original Sin 2 was a novelty at the time in how it used origin characters. You could argue it was guilty of this phenomenon as well, and I've already gone over other problems the game had, such as the lack of meaningful long-term choice and consequence as a result of open-ended, co-op friendly writing. But personally, I never felt that Ifan, Sibyl, the Red Prince, or even Fane were so important, so powerful, that they took center stage. Divinity still has major problems with a very obvious lack of world building, and a world that doesn't really feel lived in, but the origin characters weren't so important that they transcended or broke reality. They were still just pieces on a much larger board, but not in Baldur's Gate 3. Everything you do, everywhere you go, you're bumping shoulders with ancient power, all-powerful deities, and figures that can reshape the Forgotten Realms on a whim. And that's where it's hard to take any of the characters seriously. Like playing a game with someone who has loaded dice, who wants to be the DM's favourite, who wants to be the centre of attention each and every time the party does something. It doesn't make for very compelling writing or a memorable experience overall. And so we come to Dragon Age The Veilguard. Just to make it clear, I have zero investment in this game either way. The fact it's been 10 years since Inquisition, the entire creative team has left, and its own developers once described it as, quote, Anthem with dragons, should tell you everything you need to know. But whether or not you're going to pick it up day one, or it heralds the end of Western civilization, is besides the point. The once legendary formula that BioWare pioneered, that being character-driven storytelling to elevate the plot, has eaten itself alive. And now everyone's special. Now everything is about romance, and the world, the setting, and above all, the quality of the writing is secondary. In that sense, Veilguard is the absolute endpoint of this phenomenon, and the cult-like fandom that OC Culture and Critical Role started not so long ago. One day, Veilguard and the bloated, desiccated corpse that BioWare has become will be the subject of academic study, but from the moment it was announced, or should I say re-announced again, that shift in focus from a game that once used its characters to enhance its setting to making its characters the only important thing about the setting is clear. John Epler, now the creative director of the Dragon Age franchise, was previously a cinematic designer on Mass Effect and Dragon Age. This role primarily involved cutscene composition and how the camera works, which has nothing to do with the characters or the writing or really any regard for the setting. Veilguard's game director and self-described queer-o-sexual gendermancer, Corinne Bush, worked on The Sims for more than a decade before joining BioWare after Anthem. She has never even worked on RPGs before, but it was apparently no issue to fire the entire writing team towards the end of development as well. These are now the people at the head of a franchise that clearly meant a lot, and still does, to a lot of people, but they had basically nothing to show in terms of prior writing experience, nor, clearly, care for the IP. It should come as no surprise then that the Veilguard throws the series' entire continuity out the window. Despite having a perfectly functional save state feature through the keep introduced back in Inquisition, nothing matters anymore. Only 3, yes, 3 choices have carried over from any of the prior games, and that's only from Inquisition. And guess what? One of them is who you romanced. Of course. Who became the new monarch in Ferelden? Did Morrigan perform the dark ritual and conceive a child? What happened to the Anvil of the Void? What happened to Hawke in the Fade? Who's now the ruler of Olay following the Winter Palace? Who drank from the Well of Sorrows? Who's the new divine? What happened to the Mage-Templar conflict? It doesn't matter, you fucking moron. Only the new characters matter. What do you know? They're pansexual too. Time was, characters meant something to RPGs. Hell, I already spent 4+ hours talking about each of them, and I have my own hills to die on about Best Girl Arushale, Viconia, or my waifu, Bart, Body Pillow. But these games understood, much like the golden age of BioWare that's long since passed, that characters enhance the storytelling in the world, not supplement it entirely. OC culture and the reverence that is developed around particular characters, be it Astarion, Shadowheart, Serana, Anders, Panam, or whoever, has come at the cost of a believable world where the player exists as only one small part within it. You can't just be a nobody, or, God forbid, have to work for something. You must be the best, the most important person in the room, and the center of attention at all times. In that way, it's not unlike Marvel and Star Wars franchising that creates characters for the explicit purpose of selling merchandise of them. Because that's all that many RPGs see characters as now, objects to brand their IP on, to get picked up by internet culture and proliferate through these communities. We don't even need to look that far back to see what it used to be like when characters didn't inspire their own subculture. They were just a point of contact within a world. Jack, Morden, Thane, Grunt, or Garrus in Mass Effect 2, Sten and Shale in Dragon Age Origins, Triss and Yennefer, arguably, in The Witcher 3, Visa Smar in KOTOR 2, Therese and Jeanette Vorman in VTMB. Now, it is a requirement that all characters be romanced, that they have steamy sex scenes, that all characters have the same wink at the camera, self-aware bullshit writing, that everyone's quirky and easy to draw for fan art. If there's anything I can say to end this on a more positive note, it's this. If in writing your world or story, you must make the characters front and center of it, then it doesn't inspire confidence in what you have to say about everything else. Write your world first and let the characters be informed by it, not the other way round. Characters are, first and foremost, people, not political mouthpieces, passive romantic escapism, or objects to put on a shelf somewhere and forget about. People are imperfect, and sure, writing sometimes is as well, but it's in remembering characters as nuanced, flawed people that will get better writing for RPGs overall.